What makes the Grimdark style different from other miniature painting styles? One of the core pillars that the Grimdark stands on is the narrative approach, the way that a perilous world shapes characters, both physically and mentally. We think of the miniatures as people who exist inside their world, and how they live. But we can't write text like in a book. Instead, we have to turn to visual storytelling, and that is what I will be talking about today. So sit comfortably, grab a drink, and ask yourselves a single question for me. How does it look when a world is dying? Worlds like Warhammer 40k or Age of Sigmar are among these worlds perpetually plagued by a never-ending war. But even with that, they feel sort of too grand to ever end, too big. Just stuck in a perpetual cycle of miserable violent conflict that will always be present. But there is a setting that truly feels dying to me, and that is the world of Trench Crusade. Somehow still alive and struggling, this world is a rotting corpse of itself, stuck in a similar, all-consuming war of religion and pure survival. But unlike the previously mentioned, this one somehow feels hopeless to me. A struggle of a wounded animal in its last death throes. Tired and slowly decaying more and more. And so I find no better faction to represent those ideas than the Trench Pilgrims of the Procession of Sacred Affliction. These characters overlap with all the main themes I was talking about, being themselves rotting, ever tired, fighting, and plagued by maddening visions of angels, deeply religious. So for the characters to feel like part of the world, I need to visually implement these themes into the models: decay, religion, war, and exhaustion. I'll be creating my own pilgrims from scratch, based on the original art of Mike Francina, converting them using the roped legs of flagellants and the decrepit bodies of Deadwalker zombies. The Deadwalkers are noticeably smaller scale in their proportions than a lot of other Warhammer models, but that makes them compatible with historical models that are true 28mm scale. We as humans are wired to read visual cues from other people, be it in expression or posture, and the latter is something we can use to give the characters a tired look, like he has been trotting through the no man's land for weeks, wearing a set of an old armor that he has stolen from a mausoleum of a night saint, following the dreamy directions of an angelic visions. And perhaps he was caught for it, the iron cuff on his hand a reminder of that. Alongside correct cutting angles, I use a piece of copper wire here to both prolong the arm into a correct looking proportion, but also to help it position in a way that he can carry a humble rifle over his shoulder. And the head is just an STL I found online, based on the original art and perfect for a humble, unassuming pilgrim. So now, I have a posture evocating exhaustion, as well as a slim, famished body with rotting wounds. And it's time to set it to stone with glue and another piece of wire. Again, the wire helps me modify the pose, as well as correcting the proportions. Some disproportion can actually be something we want to reach, to get a feeling of an uncanny valley, a bit of weirdness if you may, but it's not what I'm pursuing here right now. Filling in created gaps requires almost no skill in sculpting, as well as creating some mass on the back, as the original piece is supposed to have a grave on there. So really, it's just about creating something that resembles back, as it will be covered with bandages later anyway. When converting models like this, it's also important to keep them grounded in believability, especially in a setting like Trench Crusade that reflects our own reality. And since I got rid of the chains that were holding his rope on his waist, I created a rope using twisted wires, which also nicely separates the body visually. While I'm wrapping the pilgrim in bandages, which are made from paper tissue soaked in PVA glue and a small amount of texture paste, it's a good time to talk about readability. Now, what I can mean by that are two things. One is making sure that all parts of the miniature are distinguished enough to be visible, which goes mostly for the painting. But here I'm talking about the second meaning, and that is everything you see is connected to something else, thematically. Like, if you see a Space Marine shoulder pad, you connect it mentally with different things. Space Marine armor, chapters, etc. You know what it belongs to. Seeing things and being able to recognize them inherently helps you holistically understand and piece together what you are looking at. Like here, if the Pilgrim had only his rotting body with a zombie head, he could have been mistaken for a Black Grail servant, and the bandages help him read as someone suffering from leprosy, because we have that visual of a wrapped body connected with the leper archetype. Realizing the themes that every part of the miniature tells will help you make distinct characters that are, well, readable. And not only that, you can add bits that are picked straight from the original lore. The Procession of Sacred Affliction is known to drown heretics in mud of the trenches by stacking millstones at them. So I created my own with milliput, and after some time thinking where to place it to not disturb the lean, famished silhouette, I placed it on the back of the Pilgrim, which added to his tired pose, as he is carrying this heavy millstone on his back, perhaps as a penance. The pose itself helps to sell the millstone as something very heavy, even if it really isn't. With it, I'm now starting to introduce the religious themes. Again, taking inspiration from the official lore, these pilgrims are known for using holy icons as shield and armor, and the religious iconography being very recognizable, even on this small scale, will make clear what you are looking at once it's painted. But it can't all be just for the very distinct, stylish editions, for the main readable themes, so to speak. It's important to keep the models grounded in reality, especially in this setting, so adding something mundane and very practical, like a water canteen, really helps to make the character alive. But even the practical items like rifles can be personalized with religious imagery, which wouldn't be uncommon as the religious war is ever present in this world. And it further pushes the theme of religion and faith strongly, making the miniature overall very readable as something from Trench Crusade. Crosses and icons are not the only way of incorporating religious imagery. Something like a saintly pose could work well, something recognizable, but also something like pages from holy texts, made from copper foil and pierced on the edges to seem like they are stitched on the bandages and cloth. This sort of variation gives each character a unique look, which in a skirmish game like this makes sure that he's taken as an individual and not just as a part of a unit of 20. You can even blend the historical accessories with modern ones, which is iconic for Trench Crusade. Like this pilgrim using an old sword with a gauntlet, a relic of the past, or maybe just the best weapon he could find. Visual storytelling is also weathering, adding some bullet holes and dents in armor, weeping sores, and rust. The narrative continues in painting too. The paint job is very simple for these, as I start with a greenish primer of pale sage, and start building deeper shadows with black and highlights with greenish white, filtering some greens and reds also in there. This is a very quick value sketch and me putting some colors in place. Colors thematically connected with rotting flesh, the reds and greens. As I wanted to make the bandages yellow, I make sure to roughly highlight them with a greenish white, so they would take the yellow better, and while I edit, I stipple the white onto the flesh also, making sure it's bright but keeps some of the sketched colors in the shadows. Once I have all the base coats in place, with some color variation, I give the model a unifying wash, except the flesh, of Goon's Grime, straight from the bottle, with just one brushful of mineral spirits. This is one of the most basic techniques enamels can be used for, but it's not entirely foolproof. See how I cover the miniature in a fashion like almost using an acrylic layer, not having too much loaded in my brush. I control it, and I'm mindful of how much and where I apply it, even if this is just a unifying wash. As I blast the miniature with a hairdryer for a few seconds after, I can then reactivate the enamel with mineral spirits, using the reductive technique to clean it off raised areas and manipulate it for mottling and general dirt on the miniature. Notice that I'm leaving the enamel in recesses, which creates shading, but also in places like the bottom of the robe, to create just some sense of dirt that got caught on the robe. The flesh, on the other hand, is shaded with caput mortuum, this red, almost violet villainy ink, which turns it into this lively yet ill-looking flesh. And then after a selective reductive technique with mineral spirits in my brush, I grab that flesh oil paint, get some of it out of a tube on a piece of paper to soak the excess linseed oil, and then with a brush unload it into a paper towel, so I have like 1% of the oil I originally loaded. I stipple the oil. The oil paint will create highlights on the skin, as well as reacting with the enamel, and as I feather and help it blend with soft touches of a clean brush, it creates a reactive oil layer that will blend naturally with other oils and enamels. So it's very easy to add some cold tones on the skin for variation and temperature contrast. These two enamels can be very overwhelming, especially Colia Green, so I'm very deliberate in the application, really just placing it here and there, having very little loaded in my brush. And as I mentioned, weeping sores and how they interact with the bandages and with the body is also a storytelling element, creating something that you would expect to see on a decrepit character like this. So I'm adding some streaks and leaks of Carrion Crimson where it makes sense, into wounds and on the bandages, etc. But even though the enamels are doing the heavy lifting here, I should not forget how useful acrylic washes are. Since they are acrylic, they won't react with the oils and enamels, even though they are not fully cured, so I can safely use them right away, adding red around the eyes, green on the skin, and a Nuln oil for shading the lines between parts like the bandages, making sure they do not read as a single surface, but as individual wraps. If you do not feel like painting holy icons, you can get around freehanding by using printed ones, which is a nice touch, just painting over the golden parts with gold, making sure it will be nicely reflective, and tying it together to the rest of the model with enamel weathering. I also cover everything on the icon except the golden and silver parts I painted with ultramarine varnish to make sure the variation between the metallic element of the icon and the rest is readable and it's not reflective in like a satin varnish. And lastly, I'm playing with some varnishes, weathering and blood effects, finishing the paint job. Other than here on YouTube, we have an extensive library of detailed painting courses and more, exploring and teaching ins and outs of the Grimdark style. If you want to learn the mastery over the Grimdark style, it's the best place to start. The main message I'm trying to give you is the way of thinking about the philosophy of Grimdark, the culture and the ideas behind the modeling and painting decisions we make, breaking down what we paint and build into themes, and what should be visually represented to both tell a story and be readable. I'm already going through more concepts and ideas of different characters for the procession, and I will hopefully get all ready and painted soon to use them in my local narrative club campaign. I hope I've made you think about visual storytelling approaches and how to reach them, how to grab them. And I'm glad to see you here till the end. But one question from the beginning remains. In a hopeless world like Trench Crusade, I don't think there will be a loud bang at the end. No glorious last stand. Both sides will grind each other into nothingness, slowly dying from 1,000 cuts, hungry and tired. For the world doesn't die with a final, defiant scream, but with a whimper.